Call the roll.
Commissioner White. Commissioner Lodge.
Here.
Commissioner Jostis.
Here.
Commissioner Jacobs.
Here.
Commissioner Bartlett.
Here.
Commissioner Thompson.
Here.
Chair Larson.
Here. Thank you very much. Preliminary agendas, Mr. Cato. Any requests for continuances, withdrawals, postponements, et cetera, et cetera?
Madam Chair, we don't have any continuances or withdrawals, postponements, that sort of thing. I did want to just talk about upcoming appeals, and these are on your tentative agenda. We have actually appeals and some other things. On the 29th of September, we will be going to council for the annexation initiation of 730 and 2030 Las Canoas. This was a lot line adjustment and contingent on annexation that was approved by the commission back in 2006. I don't know the exact details, but basically we sent that off to be processed, and the county looked at it and said, whoa, you have to do something with us. I can't remember exactly what it was, and it took some time to go through the process with the county to get it ready for the annexation. And so they finished with that process, and now we're continuing with our process, which is to take it to city council, get council to initiate and adopt some resolutions and ordinances for zoning designation, general plan designation, inclusion in the hillside design district, that sort of thing, and then we'll send it on to LAFCO for the official annexation process. So that hearing will be on the 29th of September. On the October 13th, there will be the appeal of 1642 High Canyon. This was the proposed 6 or 7 lot subdivision on the right-hand side as you go up the hill, which we asked for a quote quick denial, after very many reviews, and the commission did deny that, and the applicants are appealing that. On the 27th of October, we have the appeal of 226 and 232 Eucalyptus Hill Drive. This is the project that was approved just on the 20th. The lot line adjustment and performance standard permit to allow 4 units on 2 lots. And then on November 10th, we have 415 Allen Road. This came to you back in May or June. It was a proposal to initiate a general plan amendment to change the general plan designation from 1 unit an acre to 5 units an acre, and I think a partial rezone to E3, and staff recommended denial, or recommended that we don't initiate the annexation, and the Planning Commission did not initiate the annexation, so the applicants are appealing that decision as well. Somehow they wanted an appeal hearing that was 6 months or so from 5 or 6 months from when the decision was made. We don't exactly know why, but it worked out for their schedules and it worked for us. So that's the upcoming appeals.
Thank you very much. I think we did have a volunteer for Eucalyptus Hill Drive, correct? That was Bruce? Yes. Yes. Thank you, Mr. Bartlett. Anybody feel any need to be present at anything? Or perhaps you can volunteer by email if you check your schedule at home. Next, I'll open public comment. Any member of the public may come and comment for 2 minutes on anything you want that's not on today's agenda. And if you do wish to make public comment on something, please take a green slip from the back of the room and then give it to staff, and you get your 2 minutes. Seeing no one come forward, I'll close public comment, and we'll come to our continued item, which is the application of Pete Allen for Mark Edwards for 124 Los Aguajes Avenue. So that being announced, this is we continued this a while back, and now we'll see how we did. So, is there any staff presentation with this?
Yes,
All
Suzanne
right.
Riegel,
Yes.
formerly known as Suzanne Johnston, will give the
Riegel.
staff report.
Yeah.
Thank you. Project is at 124 Los Aguajes. We were last here on April 16th. The project is to demolish the existing single-family residence and garage and remove the landscaping and construct the 3-unit, 3-story residential building with ground-level parking and replant native plantings along the Mission Creek development limitation area. The required applications of the revised project are for a modification to allow a portion of a 3-story building to encroach into the front setback along Los Aguajes, and a modification to allow a stairway and support column to encroach into the interior yard setback to the east. A coastal development permit is required for the new multifamily residential building, as well as a tentative subdivision map to allow 1-lot subdivision for the purposes of 3 residential condominiums. Since the April 16th review, the project has gone back to ABR on 3 separate occasions. I do have Keith Rivera from ABR here to discuss how they arrived at their final comments if you have questions for him. But I will walk you through each of the elevations and show you the April 16th review and the current proposal. And I tried to get these as close to the same scale on the PowerPoint as possible. So here's Los Aguajes elevation. This is the back at Mission Creek. This is the east elevation along the 2-story apartment building. And this is the west elevation that abuts the commercial building to the left of the property as viewed from the street. This site plan shows the current site plan. The orange shows where the setbacks are, and the green line that's kind of faint is the Mission Creek development limitation area. And at our last review, PC had asked the applicant to respect the 25-foot development limitation area and not have any encroachments in that area, as well as reduce the number of modifications as much as possible. You can see the blue oval up at the top. That's showing where there are 2 support columns, I guess right here, and the 2-foot encroachment of the stair along the interior setback. There is also on the westerly portion a fence here along where the parking spaces that would be allowed with a design waiver. It does not require a modification. And again, on the second floor plan, I'm still showing where the support column is here, and the stairway is at the easterly property line. And on the third floor, I'm showing the encroachment of the deck and 3rd-story roof element that projects into that setback. So this is how it's viewed, a little bit larger scale from the front, and a cross-section on the right showing the setback from the front property line. And I just wanted to go back to the environmental review. We adopted a final mitigated negative declaration on April 16th. And with the implementation of the required mitigations that are outlined in that document that have been incorporated into the conditions of approval, all potentially significant impacts have been reduced to a less than significant level. So staff supports the project, including the modifications, and recommends that the Planning Commission approve the project, making the findings outlined in the Section 7 of the staff report, and the making
Thank you very
and with
much.
the conditions in Exhibit A. Sorry. Thanks.
Thank you. So presentation by the applicant, please.
Chair Larson, members of the Commission, I'm Mark Edwards, and I'm the owner of 124 Los Aguajes Avenue. At our last meeting in April of this year, we had what I'd like to characterize as a very productive work session. At that time, we discussed the merits of the project. If I may, I'd like to briefly review them for you at this time. We are committed to the archival preservation of a potential historic resource, not only by strict adherence to required CEQA guidelines and the Historical Landmarks Commission's requirements, but by offering to create documentary records of the process and to provide bound copies of that work to the Gled Hill Library at the Santa Barbara Historical Museum and the archives at UCSB. Additionally, an integrated stormwater system eliminates and reduces post-construction runoff in excess of the city's current requirements, and through the use of a bioswale and subterranean rock chamber, our stormwater is retained on-site, cleaned, and restored to groundwater reservoirs. Further, the sound attenuation of both inside and outside living spaces is below the bright line of community guidelines. At the same time, the building's mass provides a buffer that reduces sound for the entire neighborhood. Green building principles have been integrated throughout our project. Examples include rainwater management and retention, usable open space, light and air, and renewable construction materials. The project will qualify for LEED certification. Also, since the last hearing, we have added a green roof to the building and solar collectors that will create photovoltaic electric power. The project also undergrounds unsightly overhead utility services along the waterway and provides generous native landscaping and habitat for wildlife in that area. Further, in an effort to preserve open space, through a land lease with the railroad, we have been able to add 49 feet of frontage and 578 square feet of area along this waterway that will also receive native landscaping and expand wildlife habitat. 2 moderate-sized ownership units will be added to the community's housing inventory while creating no adverse impacts to our public systems. These residential units will eliminate the possibility of the land being developed for higher density use, such as hotel motel, and will prevent the polarization of use and style as cautioned by the coastal plan. All required parking will be on-site and behind closed doors. Since our last meeting, we have added an additional on-site guest parking space in response to both neighborhood concerns and the practical needs of the development. In addition to adding a green roof, solar collectors, and an on-site guest parking space, we have set the entire building back from the top of Creek Bank a minimum of 25 feet to a maximum of 32 feet, eliminated all building front setback encroachments, eliminated all east and west interior setback encroachments with the exception of a 2-foot edge of the main staircase from the ground level to the second floor and support columns. This remaining encroachment is supported by a majority of the ABR who have determined that it does not pose a negative aesthetic impact or adversely add to the project's mass, bulk, and scale, nor does it interfere with neighborhood compatibility. Finally, while the international style has always been supported by this commission, in accordance with your request, we studied architectural design solutions and worked closely with the ABR to refine all elevations of the building, its mass, bulk, and scale, while working to reduce modification requests. All goals have been met and enjoy strong 5-2 majority support of the ABR. Before I turn our presentation over to my architect, I'd like to share a few thoughts with the Commission. Neighborhood consideration and compatibility is integral to any successful development project. In response to the Commission's comments concerning heights in the neighborhood, I have provided a table of comparable structures. On? Oh, I see, got it, right here. I've also added a diagram of where these structures are located on the map. They range from single story to 4 stories, and in heights from 29 feet 8 inches to 39 feet 4 inches. There are 7 existing 3- and 4-story structures, all of which are taller than the proposed 29-foot 7-inch development at 124 Los Aguajes Avenue. Also, the Commission has recently approved a new development in the neighborhood that includes 3-story elements, which are 34 feet tall, and a modification for residential conversion with elements encroaching 9 feet and 351 square feet into a front setback. Lastly, Pete, can we change? The definition of neighborhood has been looked at in different ways during the course of our discussions on this project. The West Beach neighborhood as defined by the general plan and the Historic Landmarks Commission, is along Shoreline Drive and the Cabrillo Boulevard to City College, along City College to Cliff Drive, along Cliff Drive to Montecito Street, and then back to Chapala. That's one concept. While a smaller neighborhood, as defined by Policy 54 of the local coastal plan, is an area bounded by the half blocks between Castillo and Bath. I believe Cabrillo Street. Cabrillo Street. I do know where I live. Chapala and the north half block of Los Aguajes. However, it is my belief that it is the most intimate neighborhood, as defined in Section 1.1 of the Urban Design Guidelines, to be the immediate adjacent developments, next plate, of a project. In this case, Los Aguajes Avenue. These are the most relevant, I believe, to a development. And this, next plate, is a visual of immediate adjacent neighbors to my property. Now, I'm pleased to present the project architect, Mr. Peter Allen, who will explain the architectural elements of our design solutions. I'll have a couple of closing comments after Pete's thoughts.
Thank you. Mr. Allen?
Madam Chair, Commissioners, pleasure to be here today. I think we've come up with a solution that works for everybody, including us, which is great. It's nice. Just in summary, I'll go through the site plan, show you, where the mod occurs, and discuss how we worked with ABR, show you the amount of landscaping that we're doing, because I think it's impressive for this project. Quickly go through the floor plans just to show how we've integrated some items there. And then I have elevations of the building, 3D shots with and without landscaping, so we can see what the building looks like and then see how landscaping integrates with it. One of the things we did, as Mark mentioned, was we added down in this area, and you'll see it on the landscape plan. This is the railroad lease area where we'll add additional landscaping and extend the creek buffer. But in essence, we've kind of made the lot bigger and the building a little bit smaller. We worked with ABR closely at your direction. Go back and work with those guys to come up with something that was supportable. And what ABR asked for, and I'm sure Keith will add anything I've missed here, is that they wanted more of a pedestrian-friendly approach to the building, a connection to the street. They wanted us to skinny up our front driveway and get more landscaping, separate the pedestrian and vehicle paths in some manner. And they wanted us to, like you did, eliminate as many mods as possible, but they were willing to work with us if something was justified that they could support. And that's what we have. In addition, the municipal code does allow, as was mentioned, ABR to grant a variance to allow this garage to go 3 feet into the side yard setback. Now, we have not enclosed that with walls, but we've used that dimension so we can slide this wall down a little bit to get our circulation. It's important to understand the intent of that. ABR and the city always wants us to have our garage doors not facing the street. So this variance allows ABR to consider that when you have a lot width that's less than 50 feet, when you have that constraint. So ABR granted that for us, and we appreciate that, and that really helps out a lot. Now, what's also shown on here in blue is the stuff that we've removed since the last time you saw the project and our previous application. This is how far we were overhanging into the 25-foot. That's completely gone now. And this was a couple of stair mods we were asking for, and another mod for something coming down the ground and a little something up front. So those are all gone now. Okay, the only thing we're asking for is this portion right here on the side yard, and actually there are 2 support columns, but I'm sure that's fine. That's the mod. If we had to get rid of this mod and pull this stair back, the driveway doesn't work. It would have to get wider in order for circulation to work. The garage would get much larger with a door that would become an engineering feat. But what I think the greatest benefit is if we get this stair moved 2 feet, we get a guest parking place. We get our turn here in one maneuver that complies with transportation requirements, and I think that's a huge benefit. Some other just little details on the plan. This is our bioswale location. You'll see that on the landscape plan. These little guys here that you're seeing are part of our green building technique using an old design tool from carports in the 60s, using a gravel oil trap, getting rid of paving in that area. Our open yard area, our required open yard area is back here, but that area still has the acoustical problems, so we worked out that we've provided protected outdoor patio space for each unit, acoustically protected. But our required open space is right here. In order to keep the architecture light and airy, instead of enclosing the garages, we left them open on one end. So when our glass doors open here, it's essentially going to be a carport. It's not really an enclosed garage. We have decorative fencing around here, and you'll see on the landscape plans how we screen the cars that way. But it keeps the architecture light and airy, which is very important for this style. And we did that along the back as well. So you'll see that the fence encroaches into that 25-foot, but no paving, no building, just the fence, and this area is all planted. There's our landscape plan. Just give you an idea of how much landscaping we've got on the project and what we've been able to negotiate with the railroad to give us, additional landscaping square footage. This shows the area where we have the car overhang that I just described. Here's our bioswale, so we can't really plant large plants in there, but it's in a location that's the best place for it. And then, a lot of planting around here protecting the view of that open parking carport as well. You can see here the entry path. It's a direct shot to the stairs. ABR really wanted us to really make that a more of a pronounced element, more of a tie. Separate it. We actually lowered the elevation of the garage down about 7.5 inches one step, so we can get a curb along this edge here to help separate, similar to a sidewalk and a street scenario. Then the next shot, this shows landscaping on the other floors. On the second floor for the flat, we actually have an outdoor area. This is our protected area, but it'll be landscaped. We'll be able to recess this in the slab, get this down at the same level as the floor, and have outdoor area inside the building. Then up on the roof, we've got our green roof system. It'll be a palletized system around the perimeter. So if you superimpose this on that landscape plan, I think you see we've got a lot of landscaping involved in the project. Second floor plan. I think what's important to note in the design, one thing is to look at the numbers. The size of the units haven't changed. The units are pretty much the same. What we've done is we've compressed the building, and we've really made the center courtyard much smaller. We used to have kind of two separate buildings that were brought together now. So the building is smaller. Maybe from a net number standpoint, it's not. But from a physical standpoint, obviously, it is. What we have on all the units are foldable glass walls. This wall will essentially open all the way up, bringing the outside in. So this living area will essentially become a deck. And there's a real efficiency in the plan you'll see here and there, and on the third floor. And doing things like this, bringing those spaces together, really makes the architecture work. And you'll see in the elevations how it really lightens up the design in the back. And our focus on the design of these units, you'll see up on the third floor especially, is that the views are going out this way and this way. All the windows along this side of the building and this side of the building are high windows for privacy. Privacy is one thing that I forgot to talk about. Commissioner Larson especially asked about privacy with relationship to the apartment buildings next door. So we've located where the bedroom windows are and where the bathroom windows are in that building, in that two-story building. We have a decorative screen wall 2 stories high right here that will screen the second floor courtyard and the third floor stairs coming down. And you'll see in the landscape plan, and we've integrated landscaping along the side, bamboo and a large plant down the side of the stairs to really, get a privacy separation for this building right here. This here is the protected patio I just mentioned in the landscape plan for unit number 3. This provides the acoustic separation required for this flat. These are modifications that we eliminated last time. We had stairs on both sides. Each unit would have its own stair. We've combined them now in the center of the building to eliminate those mods. It's not the most ideal scenario, and I still need to work on this here, but it's certainly solvable, and we'll get it done. Up on the third floor again, showing what our encroachments were before. This was a planter. This was a large planter. This is where this unit came out into the, used to be 15-foot setback, now it's 20-foot setback. So that's what we have gotten rid of. And this area here is where obviously, a mod is being requested. It's really being requested for the use of the deck, not necessarily a building, because this could be a roof and it wouldn't require a mod. So it's specifically the use, and I think staff would agree with me on that. And then up on the roof, we do have some roof overhang that goes beyond the 2 feet that's allowed. So those are them. Get back here. Whoops. Other one. So those are the mods. You'll see here on the third floor, just again to emphasize, this is a glass wall that opens this area up. This is a folding glass wall that opens all this area up. And really the view focuses out this way, and the mountain view is like so. So we have glass in this corner you'll see on the elevations, but it's back, the footprint of the adjacent apartment building is back in this area. So privacy is something we considered the whole way along and have still maintained. This area here, this enclosed patio, is the acoustically protected area for this unit, and then the acoustically protected area for this unit is on this deck here because all the noise sources are back there as long as you stay over here. Roof plan showing how much green roof we have. This is the area we will have our photovoltaic system. This is where we have our roof access. The staff report, as part of the comments ABR had, was we used to have an enclosed roof access up here, making it easier to climb up and get these palletized green roof system up there. They just really push us to get everything off the roof, so we did. We'll have to come up with an engineering. It'll be fun to figure out a way to get that to all work. But we did, at ABR's request, lower all that stuff. Also kept the edge of the green roof back from the edge of the roof so we can maintain that nice thin line you'll see in the elevations. That's very, very important to this style of architecture. So here we'll start off with the elevations, both with landscaping and without.
You've got about 3 minutes left in time.
Okay,
So.
I'll hustle. Working with ABR, they want us to reduce the amount of plaster mass on the front of the building. Used to come up here, and so we have made it much more horizontal now. There's our glass walls that open up. This is translucent glass on the deck railing, so it provides privacy, yet still very light. We recessed the garage back about 8 inches to get a nice shadow line along here. And what you can see here, it's important that you can look in this elevation, is we got a nice, good, pedestrian access. It's very obvious. It works. It ties in very well. Our spider leg comes across and frames it. We were even able to get landscaping down here underneath, and also landscaping back here to really protect the view of those cars. Coming down around the side, this is we have a fence running the entire length for privacy. Right here, that's the mod, half of the stair popping out. There's the decorative screen wall I was talking about that provides privacy from this courtyard area to the apartments adjacent. But what the elevation shows is how we're able to really simplify this, refine it, and give it its apparent height really comes down by these very strong horizontal lines that we've got. And this is what it looks like with landscaping. We'll have a nice large plant here again, kind of screening that stair coming down. This is coming around the back. You can kind of see here are our decorative fences, and the back of those garages are open. So we have a very light piece of architecture here. And then these are the folding glass walls here, and up here on the third floor deck, that'll open up and just make this really nice and light. But you can see there's a lot of opening on the massing down in here. It's all open down under here. So the building is very light, works very well. And then up here in the corner, we do bring the glazing around just because that's where the view is. But you can see how high the windows are. And bathroom windows such as this are oriented away from that adjacent building. And here's what it looks like landscaped. So the cars are screened back here. Around the other side, you can see how we've kept the windows high. Even though we really don't have a privacy issue with the commercial building next door, there's a potential for that in the future. And again, we're focusing really the views and the openness on both ends, the front and the back of the building. So it looks like landscaped. That's why this is where our biral swale occurs, so really you're not going to see any vertical massing there. Last shot, and with landscaping, really showing how horizontal and low, long and lean the building has become, and how open it's open in here, how open it is down there. You can see just the tail edge of the green roof and the tail edge of our condensers up on there. But when you're down at ground level, those certainly actually will not be visible. So, in summary, just wanted to let you know we worked diligently with ABR to refine the project and to come up with something that works for everybody. So Mark has a couple last comments, and we'll be all done.
Thank you, Mr. Aylen. Very brief.
Just 4 quick sentences. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank planning staff for all their efforts in working with us on this project. I'd also like to acknowledge my neighbors, many of whom I met with, for the time they've afforded me to discuss the project and the input and the changes that they've made in the project that we've been sensitive to. And of course, my talented consultants, without whose efforts I would have no project to present. In closing, we have attempted with this project to proactively integrate the planning principles of the city with the overall goals of the development. We believe it is an asset to both the neighborhood and the community. We thank you for your consideration. We ask for your approval of our project, and we're here to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. That closes the presentation by the applicant, and I'd like to open the public hearing. So if you are here, oh, yeah, I was going to do that after the public hearing. If you don't mind waiting a little longer, sir, from our friend from the ABR, Keith, after the public hearing, we'd like to hear from you if you don't mind. Thanks. So if you would like to speak to this item, please go to the back of the room, grab a green slip, or actually you can just come up and then fill a slip out later. So anybody wishing to speak? Oh, we got one. Rich Underman. Welcome. Okay, 2 minutes, please, sir.
2 minutes. Thanks
Thank you.
for letting me talk. I'm here in support of this project. When my wife and I moved to Santa Barbara in 1995, we bought an apartment building 4 doors down from this 104 Los Aguayas because we love the area. It reminded us of the marina near where I grew up in San Francisco. And we'd hoped that sometime we'd tear the building down and build a condo for ourselves. Well, you know, it didn't take very long to realize that was stupid, that this town really needs rental apartments. And so we didn't. It's still there. It's a 17-unit, nice little apartment building. But when Mark Edwards came and talked to me about his building, I was very excited because some of the things that we had hoped to do with our project, he was doing. He was taking a 1 unit and turning it into 3. He was taking a very small little out-of-scale building next to the railroad tracks and the giant Corps of Engineers creek and the freeway and putting what seemed like a much more in-scale building. And I was fascinated with the way that they kind of evolved this thing. It wasn't just a cookie-cutter kind of apartments. These are really unique buildings. This is going to be a fun place to live. You can live upstairs and sleep downstairs. There's a lot of cottagey, cabin, beach sorts of things that are happening here. Now, I know Mark Edwards because I sold him a historic building. He helped me move it, that we moved from a hotel we built on Garden Street to 414 De La Mina. And I watched him build that, and I saw the love and care that he put into that project. He lives there now. It's a fabulous little development. And I know that when he does this, having seen the numbers of changes, the attention to detail, the patience to get this thing done, the listening to people, working with people, he's going to build just this probably just as well as the one he did at 414 De La Mina. If any of you haven't seen it, you were on the Planning Commission when we did that. It's a sculpture studio that was on our hotel site, a massive, beautiful building. We moved it down to the creek. Yukon 20 extra feet out of us as a creek setback, which turned out to be good because it's a beautiful garden. And he did this incredible inside and built 4 other units next to it. It was a real win-win situation. I think we've got that going here. And I really, as a person who's ridden my bike through here like every other day for the last 15 years in the West Beach area, I think this is a winner of a project. I encourage you to support it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Mr. Scott Bailey, please. Welcome.
Hi, thank you.
State your name, please.
Scott Bailey. I'm here representing the ownership of the adjacent property at 201 West Montecito Street. I am the owner's rep, and some of you guys may be familiar with, we have an ongoing project there that is hopefully nearing completion. But Mark took the time to meet with me and review his project, and one of the things that stood out to me was the lengths that they had gone to try to accommodate the concerns of all parties involved. And it struck me as pretty impressive, the lengths that they had gone to try to make those accommodations. In terms of the specific mods, anybody who knows that area knows the parking that's an issue in that area. And in terms of finding a way to manipulate certain elements of that structure to gain an additional parking space off the street, I think is a huge thing and certainly worthy of consideration. I know that's one of the concerns with anybody that we've spoken to, is just that they're not looking for negative impact there. And I think by going above and beyond in that step, it's certainly worth the mod. In terms of the modification as it relates to the outdoor deck on that second level, is it second or third level, excuse me. To me, it helps the character of the building, and there's not really any structure involved. There is a fence, I guess, that would be erected of some sort, or glass panels to do that. But in my sense, not only does it enhance the use of the building, but it enhances the look of it architecturally. I know it's not 100% necessarily within the theme of some of the structures in that area. Obviously, it's a little bit of a unique space, and I think it's interesting. But my own personal insight on it was that it kind of helps to serve as a bridge between what in effect is a band of commercial buildings surrounding this neighborhood, and it makes a nice bridge between the two, because it has a unique element that's not seen in a lot of homes in that area, but it also doesn't stick out like the existing single family does, almost like I picture the holdout in front of the big development, and you got one little corner where somebody just refused to move away. That's almost what the existing one looks like to me. So I'm certainly in favor of it. I spoke with the rest of the ownership of the property that I represent, and they encouraged me to come here and speak positively on its behalf. So,
thank you very much.
Thank you.
And there are 2 items. We received a letter from Paula Westbury and also from Robert and Patricia Maxim of public comment, and neither of those parties are for the project, and they will be in the record. So I would like to ask, yes, Mr. White?
Question when you get have some questions.
Oh, okay. I'd like to ask the ABR. Yeah. So would you please come forward? I believe it's Keith Mixon, right? Oh, Rivera. Well, see, please introduce yourself. The chair blew it.
Chair Larson,
Sorry.
Commissioners, Keith Rivera with the ABR.
Thank you. Please forgive me.
No problem.
Thank you.
And just to touch light on the review of the project over the last 3 hearings that it's had with the ABR, I think the ABR focused on 3 particular areas. And the first was the side yard setback, and in particular the circulation there and the mass that was created. Went through several iterations where that whole circulation system was revised, and I think because the resulting element is an open stair with an open structure, we felt it didn't have an aesthetic impact. It didn't add to the mass. Similarly, the other area that was of particular focus was the front elevation, and with the modification there, I think the comfort level there with the aesthetics impact of that was that it was not enclosed space, but it was an open deck. We did have a number of issues with kind of the architectural elements of that front elevation and how it contributed to an appearance of mass. And the applicant went through a number of iterations to alleviate that situation. So particularly I think the horizontal band, which broke up a tall vertical mass previously, and setting the railings back greatly reduced the visual appearance of that. And then the third element that got a fair amount of scrutiny was, as Peter had touched on, was the roof. And initially there were a number of roof elements related to the access and trash chutes and et cetera. So again, that was modified considerably to make those more or less unapparent from below. And in summary, I think what it all got down to, in my mind, was the context that this building was in, and that given the scale of immediate neighbors, that really played into the appropriateness of the project.
Thank you. Any questions? Mr. White?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Obviously, the project came back to you several times, and there were split votes all the way. And I noticed that Mr. Manson-Hing voted, did he abstain once, or at least he voted against the prevailing group. And so I took it upon myself to call him and ask him about, well, what were his concerns. And it seemed as if he was not in favor of the project as it's currently configured. Could you describe a little bit in more detail what that dialogue was about amongst the board? What were the big issues that people were in disagreement about?
Well, I think several board members had particular issues or concerns with just the architectural style, and frankly, I think project of this style was, in my mind, was held to a higher level of scrutiny by the board just because of its nature. So I think that was considerably a concern of one member who consistently voted against it. I can't really speak for Chris's particular concerns. I think a lot of that revolved around the pedestrian entry, and the real articulation of that as an obvious pedestrian way into the project. So I think that was the other sort of level of concern with some members.
So that the board as a whole was comfortable with the bulk of the building?
Yeah, I think as the minutes reflect, I think the majority of the board felt that there were an aesthetic impacts. And again, I think because those elements that are in the setbacks are not contributing to enclosed space and therefore mass.
Thank you.
Ms. Jacobs?
Along the same lines, but I'm particularly interested in the street frontage and the way the building addresses the street. It's it looks good when it's got all the plants and stuff grown up in front of it in the drawing, but it still doesn't have a kind of a lively feel to the street. And I'm wondering specifically what was the dialogue about that, about the sense of entryway coming from the street for pedestrians to walk into the building. I think the front doors are, you can't see them from the street, so that's always a question for me.
Yeah, I think, with a project with a ground floor of garages, that is an issue. Obviously, you're not going to have the same opportunities as with a ground floor unit that could address the street, have a front porch type of entry. So I think that was part of the issue. I think given the architectural style that this building, the direction it's taking, that the type of articulation of the entry is appropriate to that. It's consistent with that style. I think particularly one of the landscape architect members of the board still had some concerns about the final articulation of that. It looks like from the drawing I'm seeing here that there has been some kind of further refinement of that to make it a more kind of obvious pedestrian entry.
Thank you.
Mr. Bartlett?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't actually have a question for Keith. I just wanted to announce ex parte communication before we get into deliberation.
Thank you. Okay.
You want me to do that now?
Yeah, got it.
Okay. I was contacted by Mark Edwards, especially since I was absent at our April hearing, and I assured him that I had reviewed all the tapes and was up to speed at what transpired, and he was just confirming whether or not I would be here today, and I appreciated at least the opportunity to at least have the same level of information that the other commissioners have, so I just wanted to announce that.
Thank you very much for announcing that. I have a question, if you don't mind. Thank you for bearing with us through the question part. Are glass railings now being allowed in the city? When I was on ABR, it wasn't allowed. I mean, it was just like a no. Is that now a...
Well, I think in this particular instance, too, because they're not a clear glass, they sort of obscure, so they're not going to have a similar reflectivity. I don't really think that the issue of the railing material was ever a concern that was addressed.
Okay. Well, I just asking because the guidelines, lead us in one direction, and I'm just checking. Any other questions for Mr. Rivera? Seeing none, thank you for your time and thank you for your service. We very much appreciate you coming today.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right, so now questions for the applicant. Ms. Lodge, followed by Ms. Jacobs.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just curious, what are the ceiling heights in the units?
They're 9 feet.
9 feet? Thank you. And then you referred a couple of times to the plantings on the roof as being palletized. Mm-hmm. Could you explain what that means?
They come in pallets like you might see at the nursery. Mm-hmm. And it's a system that you haul those pallets up and place the pallets and then take the pallets out and replace them. It has to do with how the system gets waterproofed and things of that nature. So it's something we're seeing now in these green roof systems.
Okay, and then you mentioned bamboo, and in context of a different project, I've heard that the city is not allowing bamboo.
Okay, we'll communicate that to ABR if you like. If we'll find out if bamboo is a material that can be used or not. We were just using it in that one location where the stair was coming down to screen the adjacent apartment building from that. So it's just in that one little area. It's not a wall of bamboo.
Okay.
I think there's...
And in reworking or working on the design, it seems so harshly angular and so on. Did you at all consider softening it with, maybe a reflection of the building that's there now, which has a charming entryway?
No. You know,
It's done a lot, you know, combining very contemporary with.
Yeah, I think what's
and
important is we recognize, you know, the criteria that we had on this particular project, try to get the height of the building down as much as we could, and give it a visual sense of length, you know, and lightness, and that's what we've done. And this style of architecture allows you to do that. We do have 9-foot plates, but we have a very limited structure. This is going to be, you know, making this is going to work is going to be a challenge. It's going to be fun to figure out how to do this. But we don't have a lot of structure to work with. So we've really pushed things down as much as we can. And I think this style of architecture allows us to do that and achieve the goals that we're looking for, you know, to get the building down as much as we can. If we start integrating different types of architecture, we'll start integrating vertical elements that will just, I think, ruin that. I think we have to be pure in what we're doing here. That's what we're really trying to do, is get those pure lines around the building.
You don't like what Robert A.M. Stern does, in other words.
No, I don't. I love creativity, and I love thought, and I love trying to understanding where these designs come from, for sure. So, if Bob Stern did this, hopefully you'd approve it, right?
Pardon me?
If Robert Stern did this, then we'd be okay.
It would be different. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bartlett, please, followed by Mr. White.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have questions, might be more directed for staff, but I do have one for the applicant. First, what is the base flood elevation? How high above?
It's only actually probably 6 inches above the existing grade, and then we've got to go another foot above that.
Right. Okay.
Pardon?
So, I mean,
right.
If you were to have built residential at street level, you'd be up a couple feet just automatically.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then I had questions for staff on the interpretation of the front modification. Obviously, that is for being able to walk on the roof surface of the second level habitable space. What triggers that? I thought it had to be habitable space for the setbacks, because obviously the habitable space of the architecture meets all the setback requirements of 10 feet first and second and 20 feet on the third. So a little explanation as to if that was a green roof, it wouldn't be a mod, but as soon as you put a railing around it and let somebody walk on it, then it is a modification. I just want to understand the difference.
We've been through discussions this morning with the city attorney and the applicant, and the encroachment right now, as it stands, will be for the roof element that projects out, that is 13 feet from the front property line instead of 18 feet. Right here, this element here projects out 7 feet from the face of the building. So it is encroaching more than the 2 feet that's allowed. So this element creates a third story. So then this deck portion and that roof element need the modification for encroachment into the front yard setback.
So if that overhang wasn't there, would the deck need a modification?
I believe the call is now that it would not.
Madam Chair, members of the Commission, this is a place that, admittedly, this question was raised literally this morning. However, my look at the definition of setback is that it is an area unobstructed by buildings or structures. The deck here, and I guess I don't want to confuse the issue very much, because Ms. Riegel covered this well. It's that roof structure. The roof structure is part of the third story. It extends beyond the 2 feet that are an allowed encroachment of a roof structure, a cantilevered architectural element. So beyond 2 feet at the end of that building, and you can see the wall there that is at 20 feet, then it goes beyond that by 7 feet. So that requires the mod. The use, staff and I are going to have to talk about the use of the second story deck and how that plays into setbacks. But right now, for purposes of today, this application requires a front yard modification, a front setback modification for that third story roof element beyond 2 feet.
Okay, that helps. So it's really it's the deck cantilevering out that's triggering the modification there.
It's the roof cantilevering.
Right, the roof. Okay, then similar question for the interior yard encroachment for the stairway and the two support columns. Now, the way the ordinance has been rewritten recently, you can have the 2-foot projection, but it has to start 3 feet above grade, and then it can go up from there. So really the encroaching part of the stairway is the bottom 3 feet of the stair and the bottom 3 feet of the columns?
The interior yard setback, I believe the definition you're talking about is really talking about from the grade to an entry on a first floor level.
No, I'm talking about architectural projections can't be closer than 30 feet to the, or 3 feet to the ground.
Okay.
They can be 3 feet or higher. So the upper part of the stair and columns is fine, but it's only the bottom 3 feet that's the encroachment, and that's, no?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Bartlett. The stairs and the support columns are not architectural elements that are
Okay.
that qualify for the 2-foot encroachment. So these are structural elements that are required as part of the building, and
Okay.
so they do require the modification.
Okay, great, thanks.
Thank you very much. And Ms. Jacobs?
Thank you, Chair Larson. I have two questions, primarily for staff. The first one is the design waiver that the ABR grants. Why is that not a modification? Just a few weeks ago on another project, we saw something very similar that required a zoning modification, and I'm wondering how is the design waiver a different thing that does essentially the same thing?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Jacobs, I'm not sure if you recall, we had a discussion about this when the zoning ordinance amendment package came to the Planning Commission. What staff would originally proposed was if an R3 lot was less than, actually, to go back even another step, we first just asked for a 3-foot to allow any parking structure to be 3 feet from the setback, or sorry, a 3-foot setback from the side property line. And as I recall, a member of the public, I think Allied, someone representing Allied, came to us and said, that's not wide enough, that's not enough space for landscape elements and for people to escape. And we ended up, the reason that we wanted this modification, or we wanted to allow it at 3 feet, was to allow, when you had a narrow lot, to allow a 90-degree turn in, and there wasn't enough room with a 6-foot side yard. And eventually it came down to it's a design review issue, not really, because we wanted to make sure that the design worked out and it looked nice and what have you. So it turned out to be, instead of just being a blanket, you allowed garages to be 3 feet from the side yard or the side property line, as it is in the R2. We made it a waiver, a design waiver, so that parking now in the R3 zone can be up to as close as 3 feet from the property line if the ABR or HLC allows it. I mean, if they grant that waiver, and there has to be adequate landscaping to make sure that works. So it turns out that that's the reason it's the waiver, and it's not a modification. It's a little bit strange.
Waiver, yeah, I'm not sure I'm getting my question answered completely, but it's only for car occupied space, so
Correct.
to speak. If there was
Yes, garages and
car
carport.
that went above this, then it wouldn't.
That's correct. It's only for garages and carports and uncovered parking spaces.
And then my second question is about how the net square footage is determined on this project. I know there's a lot of open space throughout the floor plan, and the determination was made that the third story is 50% less than the first story. And how did that happen?
The way the ordinance is written about the 50% rule is that it's the net building footprint. So you take the building footprint, whatever that measurement is, and then 50% of that. So the second, I guess the first ceiling that you come to, you look at the shadow on the ground, and that top level is less than 50% of that in habitable square footage.
Okay, so the ceiling or the roof, because the roof has cantilevers that go out.
I think we're talking about the same thing. I'm talking about right here. Oops, sorry. Talking about this area here. If you were to draw a line straight down and enclose that area, the whole garage area, that footprint of the building would end up being more than double of the top. Correct.
You don't subtract out staircases and stuff? I thought staircases.
They only count on one level, but no.
And then the top one would be done the same way?
No.
No. It's internal floor area.
So it's really not comparing apples to apples. It's a different kind of calculation to figure out the net foot and the net square footage of the third floor.
Correct, but it's specifically written
if
footprint.
If a different calculation had been made, there would be a 15-foot setback for the whole building. And instead, they get a 10-foot setback at the front.
Correct.
Mr. White?
Well, I'm done. Thanks.
Let's stroll through that again.
Madam Chair. Madam
Yes,
Chair,
Mr. Vincent.
I will read you the zoning ordinance.
Okay.
The setback section regarding three-story buildings or structures. The general rule is a 15-foot setback for the front setback. However, if the net floor area of the third floor is less than 50% of the net floor area of the first floor building footprint, the front setback shall be reduced so that the ground floor is 10 feet, the second story portions are 10 feet, and third story portions are 10 feet. To answer Commissioner Jacobs' question regarding the third floor, it is the interior space, the net floor area. As we've had discussions before, that is the enclosed floor area inside. So the cantilevered roof that is not net floor area. And so that's what the ordinance says.
And then the first floor calculation, though, is different. It's not at this. See, I see net, and then I think it means the same thing, but in this case, apparently it doesn't. It means the footprint as a geometric shape, just a big rectangle, rather than having pieces carved out of it as the upper stories would have.
I'm looking at the ordinance and I would like to hear from staff because I'd like to see how they've applied this. The net floor area of the first floor building footprint.
Yes.
That seems to meld two different concepts, and so I want to know how the staff has applied that.
Madam Chair, I guess we're applying it just as Ms. Riegel has said. We counted the net floor area of the building footprint. In this case, you may recall in the April meeting, the applicants were saying, hey, if we just extended the walls down, that would be all this would be much more square footage, right? And that's essentially what, at least in our interpretation of this language, that allows us to do. We look at the footprint of the building, not just the enclosed space on the first floor. That actually penalizes them for not enclosing the first floor, right? If they enclose the first floor completely, then it obviously is less than 50%. The third floor would be obviously less than 50%. So after the April meeting, we went back and looked at this language closely, and the footprint is the footprint. It's not just the enclosed space.
And stairwells and elevators, things that are subtracted out of net floor area for the upper stories, are not subtracted out of floor area for the bottom story.
Correct. Vents and stairways and stuff, we count them on the first floor. You only get to count them once, but we usually count them on the ground floor.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Lodge.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm still struggling with this, Mr. Vincent. So I understand that if the third floor is less than 50% of the footprint of the first floor, it doesn't have to be set back as far, it can only...
There are two different alternative setbacks. If the building meets the qualification that we're discussing, it then has it has a setback of 10 feet for the first floor. The project meets that setback. It has a setback of 10 feet for second-story portions of the building. This project meets that setback. The third-story portions of the building requires the modification for the cantilevered roof.
But how far back does it need to be set back?
That is 20 feet.
That's 20 feet. Okay.
And
You said 10 before, and that's what thoroughly confused me. I think you
I
misspoke.
apologize if I
That's okay.
said that.
Okay, so it's 20 feet for the third floor. Thank you very much.
And I see Ms. Jacobs' lights on. Oh, okay. All right. Oh, Mr. Justice.
Thank you. I just had one simple question, and that's I took the not seeing a metric on the site plans. I took the floor area from the residence, added it to the carport and garage, and got $49.99 for the total square footage of this project. Divided it by the lot area of 6,000 square feet and came up with a floor area ratio of 0.83. Did staff do a calculation as far as floor area, or is
I
that
did not.
accurate? Or?
That would be how we would calculate it, but I did not do a floor area ratio because it's not a requirement of the ordinance for multifamily.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. White?
And thank you. And back to our favorite earlier topic about setback. The generic R3 setback here is 15 feet if we don't have these special conditions met.
Correct. Front setback.
Front setback would be 15 on the first floor. What would it be on the second floor?
It would be 15 feet on all floors.
15, 15, 15. Instead, we can go 10, 10, 20. Okay.
And just the side yard setbacks, the interiors change too. They go to 10 feet.
They go from 10 feet to 6, 6, and 10.
Say that again?
The general rule for interior setbacks of three-story structures in the R3, R4 zone is 10 feet. Mm-hmm. If the building qualifies for this exception or alternative setback requirement, it goes to 6 feet for the ground floor, 6 feet for the second floor, and 10 feet for the third floor.
All right. Mr. Justice?
I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. Well, there we have it. I have a quick question. Is that green roof for the use of the residents, or is it just pallets that get exchanged when they dry out? I mean, this doesn't seem like very green to me. What's the point of it, Mr. Aylen?
Well, the point of doing it is just as a green concept. You have less roof exposed, less reflection, less energy absorption in the building. So when you put a green roof on it, it's as if you have, a lawn or something that absorbs.
But if the green roof dies and then
It won't, but it needs to be maintained just like the rest of the landscaping.
when you said palletized, I thought you meant that you were switching out the sod.
Well, that's not the system. That's how the system gets installed. If something does go bad, something goes wrong, you can pull a pallet and replace a pallet. But in order to get access to the waterproofing down below and the drainage system, you pull these pallets out of the way.
That's fine.
To access them.
Okay, I just was curious because there was that brief mention of railing and green on top of the roof, and it would be a great place to put a beach towel, but it's not a good plan.
It's against the law.
Yes, that's why I was going to go there. Thank you very much. All right. how's everybody doing for some thoughts? Comments? That's all right. Take some time if you need it. Mr. Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, this has been a long and arduous process for the applicant. The ABR has given us their review, and they're responsible for the architecture. We've been talking a lot about architecture, but the Planning Commission is responsible for land use, so I'm only going to talk about land use. It's a constrained site. It's narrow. We know it's got the creek in the back, but the way Lower Mission Creek has been walled off, quite frankly, you could probably build right up to the edge of the wall and not impact the creek or have the creek impact the building because of the way it's been turned into being a walled channel rather than a real creek. The biggest issue that I see from a land use standpoint is the noise issues, and you've done everything that I could see possible to try to deal with the noise. The noise sources are the railroad and the highway primarily, and they're not going away. So if we don't take staff's recommended approach to approving the issues with the noise and where we allow the private open space to be below the threshold, the only other option is to never develop the site. I mean, so it wouldn't make any sense. So I certainly support the staff's recommendation to accept the applicant's solution to that. So taking all of the items into consideration, I still think this is a good project. It will provide us with a couple of more moderate units of housing that we need, and so I'm all in favor of supporting it.
Thank you, Mr. Justice.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've been intrigued by this project since the first time I saw it, and from day one I've complimented the applicant on the straightforward way that you've gone about the design and refinement of this building, and this iteration reflects a continuation of that attitude, and I appreciate it. Regarding the modifications, I understand what the modifications are, and I can live with the stairs and the front yard setback mod for the reasons that the ABR felt comfortable with it. I think one of the interesting things about this project is it has done a very creative job of using its modifying the way the skin of this building works to reduce its apparent size, scale, and bulk. And you've really dug deep into the tiny corners of the zoning ordinance to make the best use of this approach as you can. Some may not agree with that, but those appear to be the rules and the way the rules are interpreted. So my underlying concerns that I voiced last time was to make the building smaller. You've done that with the way, I mean, you've interpreted my intent differently than I had when I made those comments, but I agree with the end result that it is not as bulky as it seemed before. You've set back from the creek the full 25 feet, which I think is an important issue. You've gone the extra distance with the railroad to get that easement and to provide some community benefit to landscaping on that side. So I think I'm there.
Thank you, Mr. Justice. Mr. Bartlett?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I think one of the things that didn't get mentioned, but it's come up in the prior meetings, I think we've had at least one of the most willing applicants to explore alternatives and listen to ideas, and I'm glad that at least he didn't give up in the process. I know it's been a long one, but I think in the end, hopefully, we all end up with a better project, and I think the applicant would probably agree with that statement, even though it's painful getting there sometimes. I think that his opening statements, I think, speak loudly to the benefits of the project. I appreciate the fact that, you know, you're doing all the historic documentation on a house that is not deemed historic, and that will be permanently in the record. As I drive through that neighborhood, especially looking on the north side of the street, I think what you're proposing will blend in much better with all the adjacent structures. And I think it really sets a nice tone for hopefully those buildings upgrading someday and pick up some of the flavored elements that you're capturing in your architecture. And as to the architecture, even though we're not here at ABR, I do think that the style that you have chosen portrays the least amount of building mass for the very low FAR that this project has. You couldn't have picked a style that would be less massive in appearance. So I think that aspect and the fact that you're close to the beach, I think it is very appropriate, even though it may not be predominant at the moment. I think that the extra parking that you've been able to achieve in this last go-around, as well as separating the vehicular circulation and the pedestrian access and circulation is very good. With that regard, I can support the modification for the stairway encroachment, especially given the fact that it really enhances the pedestrian circulation. It does keep it separate, and it is pretty much disguised by the 8-foot legal wall on the property line. You won't see it between that wall and all the landscape. So it really doesn't have a visual or aesthetic impact on the neighborhood. Also, I think that the roof overhang, although it's requiring a modification for that third level living room, for me it's obviously more sustainable. This whole design is about sustainability. You need the shading on the south side, and that overhang really does not protrude any closer to the front property line than a legal overhang had you done the 15-foot setback straight up on the building. So I don't think it's any closer to the public right-of-way than had you done a very simplistic building that doesn't have this articulation. So I could support that modification, and I think it actually improves the architecture and sustainability. I think you've done a lot to increase the privacy to the neighbors by modifying the floor plans, raising your windows where you're adjacent to your side neighbors to protect the privacy. And I think that the extra landscaping and the drainage and retention features, both on the ground and with the green roof, are really commendable. And the fact that you were able to negotiate with the railroad to even increase the landscape at the back, I think, is huge. So anyway, I can support the project, and I'm glad that it didn't die along the way, even though it's been 5 years in the process. So thanks for bearing with us.
Thank you, Mr. Bartlett. Mr. White, and then we'll go to the other side.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, clearly you've got many cutting edge and exciting elements to this, such as the green roof, and it's going to be solar, and I appreciate that the extra railroad space you were able to creatively come up with that. The concern I continue to have is that what you've done is internalize the garage space. That's how you've created and you use as you say, Pete is one of the few people that would be able to find these interlocking pieces of the zoning ordinance and make them work as a tool and come up with this configuration. And then you end up with the living area. You have living dining areas on the top floor, and that's going to obviously be a great view site. It tends to make it so that instead of it being the little bitty bedrooms upstairs kind of thing, those are going to be primary spaces to live. That's a bit of a concern of mine, and also the loss of the connection. Ms. Jacobs mentioned it. The sort of what one would expect is there's a unit there's a front door on the ground floor and access going to the back somehow, and that you'd be able to sort of keep a face to the street that we're losing completely with this design. It's car and landscaping on the ground floor, and that's the trade-off that's being made. Also, something that again I want to raise, because just as not to lose sight of it as a topic, it's in Plan Santa Barbara, and I know we're not going to apply Plan Santa Barbara to this project, but that we're looking at our economist told us that 1,500 square feet is a luxury condominium. We have a two-bedroom unit that is just south of 1,500 square feet. We have a one-bedroom that is just a little more south of 1,500 square feet, and a one-bedroom that's 1,100 square feet. So we have units that are well above what our economist was telling us is a standard condominium. And again, I'm more doing that for the conversation of the commission and for anybody who's watching this than for this project. We can't hold you to standards that haven't been established yet. But these are, in my mind, luxury condominiums, and they will not contribute to anything of the needed housing stock for this area. Again, not to be, I'm not going there with you at this particular point, but obviously if these were 950 square foot units, this building would be substantially smaller, and so forth and so on. So, or if we had some way that they were contributing, that the larger size was contributing to the fund that would then be going toward workforce housing, there would be another way that it could help. But these are luxury units. The benefit that I do see out of this is the extra parking space inside is something worth struggling for, and this is parking is definitely a premium there. I appreciate Mr. Thompson's comment that we are here to do land use primarily. So I don't like the loss of the presence to the street, and I feel the building is bulked up a little extra. I do like the modern design. I like the whole concept of that. The glass railing, I think, is a good solution. I'm disappointed that the city actually doesn't allow it. I feel like it's a good thing to have the glass, the use of glass in various screening situations. So I'm sending a little bit of a mixed message, although I'm leaning towards supporting the project, but I'm still sort of want to listen to what my colleagues have to say. And clearly you've done excellent work in the whole area of the drainage and the other green elements. I do commend you for those.
Thank you very much. Ms. Lodge?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. White's comments about the size of the units are ones that I concur with, though I realize this is not before us. The city does not need more luxury units, and so in that regard, this project is not a benefit. My main problem is, and I feel differently about the style than some of my colleagues, is that I have to make the finding that it preserves the unique character of the West Beach neighborhood. And I just can't make that finding. I realize that there's a commercial building next door, which was essentially a box. The apartment building on the other side isn't much different from a box. But in looking at the neighborhood as a whole, I don't think it fits. So I will not be able to support the project.
Thank you, Ms. Lodge. Ms. Jacobs?
Thank you, Chair Larson. I also will not be able to support the project, and Ms. Lodge iterated my same feelings about the neighborhood compatibility. We need to make a finding that that this is appropriate for the neighborhood and contributes to it. And we also need to make a finding of sound community planning. And I'll just give you the reasons why I don't think that why I cannot make either of those. Regarding the neighborhood compatibility, I don't dislike the building style, and it is bookended by a box and another box, so putting a box in between kind of makes sense. But the neighborhood as a whole has a completely different character. At the time this came before us last time, it would have been the only three-story and the tallest building in its immediate neighborhood. Since that time, the commission approved another building, so now it's not the tallest, it's the second tallest. The building has larger units, which are not part of what our community needs. There's lots of plate glass, which doesn't really fit in with the neighborhood context. And it has, open garages are kind of a on-again, off-again thing that we do and don't like. It's nice to have the light and the air. However, it also becomes a place where people store their personal items, and you get kayaks and surfboards and bicycles and boxes and junk and stuff, and that's what sits there for people to see as they walk by the property. So I'm not completely in favor of open garages when they are visible from the street. The ABR did approve this with a close vote. It was 5-3, and then one of the opposing members was not there, and it was 5-2 for the final vote after 6 ABR meetings for concept review. 6 meetings for concept review is a lot. Usually a concept review is 1 or 2. To be going back at 6 always makes me wonder how cooperative the client is actually being with the ABR's requests. And it was not a unanimous decision in the end by the ABR either. So I'm not persuaded by the fact that the ABR liked it. I don't think that was correct. That's not true. And perhaps at some point we'll have a discussion about what is the purview of ABR and what is the purview of the Planning Commission, what land use means. In a built-out city, I think land use means including the context and the streetscape. I think appropriate land use is not only discussing noise and drainage. I think that in a built-out historic city, there's more to that discussion, and that is what contributes to sound community planning. So I'm not going to be able to support this project. I do think the site is developable. I think you could bring it back with no mods and get my support for a coastal permit and a subdivision map. But the project as it's presented to us today, I cannot support. What's currently on the property in its own humble, housey way has a kind of positive presence in the neighborhood. It's part of that historic district, or not district, but historic neighborhood. And the proposed building, I do not see having a positive benefit at this point.
Thank you, Ms. Jacobs. And I'm going to make my comment. I like the building and the architecture, but not the size. I think it just crowds the site, and I just feel that the net difference isn't enough to me to put it over the top. So I won't be voting in favor of the project either. And with that, can we have a motion, please? Mr. Thompson? No. Oh, Mr. Justice?
Madam Chair, before shutting off discussion, I just wanted to have a little bit more of a conversation about the bulk issue that I think several commissioners raised, and the sound community planning piece that Chairman Charmaine had raised, and just kind of get that out there. I mean, for one, in part, I agree with the issue about the size of the units, and I think they are larger than they should be, or that they need to be responsive to the issues we've been addressing all along. I think the reason that I lean towards the project is I see more than that issue as weighing in on this, that I see having to balance a number of issues, including the applicant's attitude, the creek piece, the lease on the land piece, the way they've treated this. Obviously I'd like to see a smaller building on here, but I understand what's trying to be done here, and I guess I don't come to the same conclusions regarding sound community planning but I do share those issues as far as the unit size.
Thank you, Mr. Justice. Mr. Thompson?
I think somebody wanted to talk before he made him.
Okay, Mr. White?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I would reluctantly go along with Ms. Lodge and Ms. Jacobs. I think that the getting rid of the mods would be if that happens, I feel as if again, I don't think this project is helping us in our overall objectives, but I think that's if we could go forward with the project without, and I would say the front mod is one I could support. The extra cantilever on the providing shade over that balcony, I think is reasonable. And we heard that not only is the setback closer on the front, but that the setbacks are closer on the sides, and the encroaching into the setbacks on the side doesn't make sense to me. And I think you're getting plenty of change there by the encroachments, by using the smaller setbacks that you're getting on the front and on the side. You're getting a lot of extra bulk already, and you shouldn't have a mod to encroach into those skinnier setbacks. So if that's something that I would be willing to go forward with approval of the project without the side yard mods, if that's something that the applicant would be willing to accept. Maybe you'd rather, anyway, I'd like to have that discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Bartlett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I'm glad that Commissioner Justice at least allowed us to have a little discussion before we just instantly vote, because a lot of times
I apologize
we
for
hear
that.
each other's comments, but we really don't get to respond, and then we're off to the next project, and then we have the same discussion again and wonder why we did the last project the way we did. I mean, I hear everybody's comments that we want more smaller units that would be of benefit to the community, but are the commissioners really willing to support the alternate mod, which is the lot area mod, to allow the applicant to have more units that are little? I mean, sure, we can get rid of the mod for the stairway or the front overhang, but if you really want the small units, we could be supportive of a lot area mod and get the small units, but I don't hear the willingness. Sure, we want to talk the talk, but nobody's going to walk the walk, and we're slowing down Plan Santa Barbara. That's where we're trying to get, but in the interim, you can get there with a mod if you have the guts to support it. So we can have it if we want to ask for it, but if the applicant comes forward for it, I know what we're going to hear up here, no mods. So we're getting what we've asked for, whether you agree with that or not. There's a way to get there, but you have to have the courage to do it. So if we're not going to do it project by project, I hope that we have the courage to get there through Plan Santa Barbara.
All right. Mr. White?
Chair, I've put something on the table, and I was hoping that'd be part of the conversation here. I think that the applicant would have the choice of getting a denial to take those two mods forward to council, or getting the project approved today without the two side yard mods. No, there's the stairway and there's the support beams, right? One mod. Okay.
We might need a couple minutes to think about that.
Okay.
But as long as the commission acknowledges that if we lose, if we're not allowed that mod on the side yard that you're talking about, we're not going to be able to get that extra parking place.
Space.
And if the
I would hope
commission's
that you'd be able to do
willing,
both, but I understand that you may not be able to.
tough. And I hope, and just listening to the conversation, I think what we've lost is some of the discussion that was done previously about the amount of land that we feel we're giving up in the back, that 25 feet. And that's maybe why it took 6, conceptual hearings, was to finally get acknowledgement that it's not a setback. that it's an area of development limitation that we complied with. Now, from a conservation element standpoint and extending the the greenery down the creek, it's very understandable, and that's what we were doing before when we were overhanging. But in our discussions, the fact that we were giving up that area in the back led to some flexibility up front on the sides, and that was said at the commission. So that's what we took with us at the same time. I think to say that we're getting a gift by going to six foot side yard setbacks is really unfair. Because
did I use the word gift?
Well, you ensued that.
Okay.
I insinuated that. As far that's what I heard. You know that we're going to you said we're going to these smaller setbacks. It's perfectly allowed. You know, it's allowed and it's part of the municipal code, just like the variance for the garages are. So I think we're complying with the rules, and we're just asking for a very small modification to make things work and provide a public benefit. So, you know, I'll talk to my client and we'll make a decision whether.
Please do.
Mr. Joseph.
While they're doing so, I want to hearken back to. I understand the intent behind the way the structure works, and yet the modification issue it is an issue for us because we have to, at least in my mind, make a finding of both appropriateness and necessity, and we've been going around this block over and over and over again, and I think I haven't understood why the applicant has no choice but to put this staircase in the front yard in the side yard setback. If I understand that a little bit better and agree with that reasoning, I can get to the modification finding. If I can't understand that, I come down on the perspective that Mr. White has articulated, which if that's the only way to do it, that's the only way to do it. But if there's another way, we should go the other way. And I think we heard that in discussions in various levels above us with some recent appeals. So I think it's a legitimate concern that we have to grapple with.
Well, and Madam Chair,
Right.
I think we're seeing one of the last. I mean, I think that the day of luxury condos getting approved in the city could be that could be becoming more challenging as the years go by. So this has got a window to success, which I don't think it may not stay open. So we'll see what happens as time goes by, but it's. These are going to be very, very nice condominiums, and so I don't know whether you can do it without that mod or not. That's where I'm able to go with you at this point today. So I look forward to hearing what your answer is.
Mr. Aylen.
I think we'll take our approval and run.
Okay.
Mr. White.
Well, then, unless Mr. Thompson is... Well, Madam Chair, I would move that the Planning Commission approve the project. It is a modification to the front yard setback, coastal development permit, and a tentative subdivision map at 124 Los Aguajes, as outlined in the staff report and with the findings made in the staff report. And then is there an environmental document that we're...
We have already adopted
done that. Okay, so that's my motion then, with the findings as outlined by staff.
Thank you, Mr. White. Is there a second?
Clarification.
Mr. Thompson.
Findings include the interior setback modification findings. Are you eliminating that?
Yes.
Second.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Justice. I'll call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 And all those opposed?
No.
No.
No. So motion carries. And this is appealable to City Council within 10 days. Thank you. And with that, we'll quickly go to our administrative agenda. Do we have any committee and liaison reports? All right. Seeing none, although the Hawks project in the 1800 block of State Street is going. It has been to HLC, so that looks like it's a go now.
Excuse me, Madam Chair.
Yes, Ms. Lodge.
That project you just referred to, which one was that again?
It's it's on the corner. It's Pedregosa. Yeah. Yeah. It just visited HLC again, so it's still on.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Justice.
Madam Chair, as a corollary to the last project, and to the conversations we had last week at our work session, I would like to find out how the Commission can send a clear message to staff that it would be very helpful to us to have a floor area ratio referenced in all staff reports. We've been at least I've been asking for it for 3 years, and it hasn't happened. And this was one of the things in this last project that was a positive factor for me. And yet I had to do the detailed calculations myself, and no other commissioners, or some other commissioners, maybe didn't make that same calculation. But there's got to be a way to. It's one number. It doesn't take a long time to calculate. It would be nice to have that in our staff reports, and it's consistent with our educating ourselves as to what those numbers mean in terms of the volumetric appearance of a building. And this last project brought up a number of design approaches that, to me, were reflected in that number that were very indicative of the usefulness of having that type of a number as one more metric to use. So it's a comment at this point, but I'd like to hear from staff on this.
Mr. Cato?
Madam Chair, we have a table of statistics that is on every single Planning Commission staff report, and we'll add the FAR into that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, I don't have a staff hearing officer liaison report for you. Any other matters for us? Mr. Bartlett.
Yes, I wanted to continue with Mr. Justice's comment, and that those FAR numbers then carry forward and become a database for the city, so that as we look at neighborhoods, we can pick out the FARs for the neighborhood, not just do it on a project-by-project basis and then have it get lost.
Thank you very much. That's a great idea.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Vincent.
I'd like to comment on this discussion.
Please do.
I understand the Commission's desire for a full panoply of information in order to make your decisions. And I withheld any comment until the end of this discussion, or at least the portion of the discussion. I do have concerns how the Commission uses information as pseudo standards, as de facto ordinances, and so I'll be careful, and I will comment when I believe that the Commission is starting to tread too closely to taking metrics, for lack of a better term, and making them into your own standards, because that is the purview of the City Council. And so I hear what the Commission is striving for, and my suggestion would be that if you wish to have such metrics as standards for comparison between buildings, then we ought to be working with staff in developing a multifamily FAR or a commercial FAR as a standard for the city. And while these numbers and tools can inform your decision making with the current system, I do want to caution the commission of going over that line of, and I can't give you a bright line test for it because there isn't one, but I will when I will make comment when I feel that the commission is moving toward using an FAR in some kind of litmus test manner, as opposed to the same way you use a story pole. Because a story pole in and of itself is still subject to the building height standard. And it's the building height standard that you are charged with implementing. Now, there are many other standards and there are many other findings that you make that are informed by your story pole, that are separate and apart from that standard. But when we start getting into FARs and we say, well, this FAR is okay, but that one isn't, that starts looking like a standard to me. And it starts moving in the direction of something that's really up to the city council to decide. And in a manner that is applied generally throughout the city, as opposed to an ad hoc decision from this commission. So I understand the commission's desire for a full amount of information in order to inform your decisions, but I do caution the commission against these, what I would term as an ad hoc standard.
Thank you, Mr. Vincent. Ms. Jacobs.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Vincent, good point. Indeed, there is no FAR for multifamily or commercial. There's not even a guideline. And I, along with Commissioner Bartlett, sat on the Single Family Design Committee, the steering committee that determined FARs for single-family houses. It was a long and arduous process with 3 years of public input. It was not a shoot-from-the-hip kind of thing. And I completely agree that it should not be used in determining multifamily proposals as they come before us. One refinement I'd like to understand, I'm hearing from my fellow commissioners that they would like to use it for comparisons, like the building next door has an FAR of X and proposed building has a FAR of Y. Can we compare those to one another and say, as this neighborhood is already built on the ground and as the commission is looking to find context, can we use it that way, or should we just really avoid this until it's had 3 years of scrutiny from a commission? Because when we talked last week with the Plan Santa Barbara staff, we did bring this up and discussed it, and it will not be part of the current Plan Santa Barbara discussion because it can be targeted as something for future discussion years out pending a committee. But at this point in time, there's no appetite for it in terms of the Plan Santa Barbara process. So I'm wondering where we stand in this gray area.
Madam Chair, members of the Commission, I don't want the whole point of my long dissertation there, as opposed to just saying don't go there, was I don't want to preclude you from having one more tool for use. I do caution, though, something along the lines of the litmus test. And sitting here right now, just simply having an FAR number that you compare against the adjacent building's FAR, maybe sometimes I could see that would be useful. In other cases, I could see where it would be entirely misleading or not a useful tool. The FAR, as we found in the Single Family Design Board, is a blunt instrument at times. It doesn't really deal with architectural character very well, And maybe that's an issue much more for single-family homes than commercial buildings, but I'll leave that up to you and the ABR to wrestle with. So I'm not sitting here precluding the idea. I don't think it's my role to do that. But I do caution how the commission uses it and how it's presented in staff reports, and so I'll be looking with a careful eye toward that.
Thank you. Thanks for watching over us, Mr. Vincent. We appreciate it. He's shaking his head for this. Somebody's got to do it.
Playing golf without a putter.
Yeah. All right. Any other business for the commission? Any other comments or questions for Mr. Vincent? No? All right. Well, then, we stand adjourned. Thank you very much.